Hello, this is Lillian, welcoming you to the 1886th edition of the Enfield Talking Newspaper, Dateline, the 15th of January 2015. The readers this week are Joan, Beverley, Rod and myself, Lillian, with Colin on the controls. The items that we will be reading come from our local newspapers, the Enfield Gazette and Advertiser and the Enfield Independent, and are their copyright. Our title music is Country Rock Polka, composed by Pat Prilly, Fernand Boulon, Harry Brewer, and performed by Jean-Jacques Perry, and is used with his kind permission. Local stories include questions raised over Chase Farm land sale, Tories blast council spending on IT, let them stay, absolute nightmare. And I have some special news items. The first one is a big thank you to everyone who responded to our survey about going digital. 2/3 of our listeners have responded to say they would like more information, or buy or test a boombox, and it is taking time to contact everyone. Sorry if we haven't managed to make contact with you yet. We hope to do so in the next 2 months. And the next one is Vocal Eyes Audio Described Performance, which is being held at Jackson's Theatre in Highgate on the 22nd of January 2015. This is inspired by Magritte's paintings, The Dead End World of Beckett, and interviews with blind and partially sighted people. Blind Man's Song by Theatre reuses theatre, mime, sound, and original live music in exploring the power of imagination. The Vocal Eyes audio described performance takes place at 8 p.m. on the 22nd of January, with a touch tour at 6:45 p.m. at the Jackson's Lane Theatre, 269A Archway Road, London, N6 5AA. To book, telephone 0208 340 5226. And the next one is RNIB event on solutions to everyday living, 27th of January. As the mainstream technology is changing by the second, so are the challenges and new barriers for blind and partially sighted people with accessing them. RNIB is hosting a one-day open exhibition day titled Solutions to Everyday Living at the RNIB London office, which is at 105 Judd Street, that's Judd, London, WC1H 9NE, on the 27th of January 2015, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The event is for anybody who is having difficulty accessing a computer, print, mobile phone, or with doing everyday tasks in the home and while on the move. No registration needed, no pre-booking, just turn up. And the next one is Enfield Vision will be holding their next forum meeting on Monday the 2nd of February from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. at the Park Avenue Disability Centre. The speaker will be Terry Okoro of the Enfield Clinical Commissioning Group, and the meeting will discuss ways to make patient and clinical information more accessible to people who are blind and partially sighted. And now over to Joan, who will read the first item of local news.
An environmental campaigner has voiced fears over the future of a planned redevelopment of Enfield's crumbling Chase Farm Hospital. David Flint, the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Green Party for Enfield North, has called for greater transparency over the way in which the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust intends to dispose of land on the 32,000-acre site to developers. The Chase Farm site in the Ridgeway is under the control of the Royal Free Trust after it took over the failing Barnet and Chase Farm Hospital's NHS Trust last year. The Royal Free is planning an extensive redevelopment of Chase Farm and is hoping to bring all the hospital services under one roof in a 25,000 square foot building with up to 500 houses and a 3-form entry primary school also on this site. At a meeting between representatives of the Royal Free, councillors, council officers, residents, interested parties at Highland School in World's End Lane, Winchmore Hill, last week, Mr. Flint asked Andrew Paniker, Director of Capital and Estates, how much the Trust was expecting to make from selling off the land that will no longer be needed for hospital space. Mr. Paniker explained that the Trust could not divulge that information as it might harm how much it might make from private developers trying to outbid one another. He added that the Trust would publish a financial viability study, but in a redacted form, so that potential bidders were not given an imagined upper limit on their bid. However, speaking after the meeting on Wednesday, Mr. Flint admitted that he was not satisfied with the responses from the panel. He said, "It is a step forward that we have this redacted financial viability assessment because we know the money has got to come from somewhere, and ultimately taxpayers will foot the bill," he said. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean we have to know whether the money is being spent efficiently. And I think the finances should be open to scrutiny and a degree of discussion. Some of the residents who attended last week's meeting voiced concerns over the dangers that would be inherent in the inevitable increase in the volume of traffic that the redevelopment would bring to an already busy road. Kieran McGregor and Kate Wilkinson of the Save Chase Farm campaign were also among those at the meeting. Speaking afterwards, Mr. McGregor said, "It is disappointing that there is nothing in their plans that would allow for re-examination of any future accident and emergency provision on the site. We are not looking for them to go back and revisit the strategy that led to the current model, but I would have thought, with the potential of a new government in a few months, then maybe A and E provision nationally could be expanded again in the future." So there.
Opposition politicians have attacked the council's £4.7 million expenditure over 4 years on information technology equipment, describing it as an act of profligacy. The Conservative group hit out at the costs of IT, including £2.7 million in 2013-14. Conservative finance spokesman Urson Hura said, "Walking around the council at times, it feels like there are more iPads than at an Apple store and more accessories than in PC World." He said that he had to take decisions on purchasing IT in his own business. There is no way I would ever sign off on some of the spend and equipment at the Civic Centre, he said. It is all nice to have kit, but a lot of it is not necessary for people to do their work. The Conservative group said that at the same time the council had cut £26,000 to close park gates at night and £72,000 on road gritting. Mr Hure attacked the spending decisions. This is yet another example of the Labour Council making poor choices with taxpayers' money, choosing to waste millions of pounds on gadgets over locking gates, gritting our roads and keeping people in jobs, he said. However, Enfield Council said it was committed to delivering excellent services in the face of funding cuts and extra demand. A spokesman said, this includes investment in new IT when existing technology comes to the end of its shelf life, meaning that we can meet the changing needs of our customers, work in a more flexible way to save money for our residents and tighten data security. This short-term investment in the IT, which underpins the delivery of all council's services, is vital if we are to continue to provide excellent and accessible services for our residents. He added that the expenditure should make it more agile and help the council to make £80 million in savings by 2018-19. Achilles Georgiou, the deputy leader of the council, said, the central issue is that we need to spend on IT so that we can become more effectively operationally in the long term. He said that if Conservative councillors did not like the iPads, they can give them back, adding that it was now quite the norm for people to use iPads in business.
Now more news about Chase Farm. Up to 100 families living in staff accommodation at Chase Farm Hospital are fighting plans to evict them from their homes by the end of March so that redevelopment can get underway. Joan Ryan, Labour's prospective parliamentary candidate for Enfield North, has joined forces with doctors, nurses and a raft of other hospital staff to lobby the Secretary of State for Health, Jeremy Hunt, to give those living in the on-site accommodation a reprieve from a looming eviction. The Advertiser has learned that just before Christmas, Chase Farm staff who live in the accommodation attached to the hospital in the Ridgeway, Enfield, were served notices telling them that they must sign an agreement by January 16th saying that they agree to move out of their homes by March 31st to enable the redevelopment of the site to start. However, speaking on behalf of the families affected, one Chase Farm staff member, who did not wish to be named, said, there is no way the average salary of staff can cover a 2, let alone 3-bedroom house anywhere in Enfield. We have children in schools locally. What are we expected to do? We cannot disrupt their schooling halfway through the school year. If we even had until the end of July, that would at least allow our children to finish this academic year. That's something that all who work here care passionately about. He added that because the jobs had been advertised originally as having on-site accommodation, that was why many staff from overseas had signed up to work at Chase Farm. But he warned that with the situation the way it is, many staff would be forced to move away from London altogether, as the pay scale does not match up with the sky-high cost of rents. Ms Ryan, who is acting as an advocate for the affected staff, told the Advertiser, frontline staff are the backbone of our NHS. The government should treat them with the respect they deserve, halt this eviction and ensure our nurses and doctors can carry on living at Chase Farm. In her letter to Mr Hunt, the former Enfield North MP wrote, I urge you to intervene personally to ensure that the staff and their future at Chase Farm is guaranteed. They would also welcome the opportunity to meet you in person to discuss their concerns in greater depth. A spokesperson from the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust, which runs Chase Farm, told the Advertiser, since July 2014, when it became clear we would require vacant possession of the residential properties on the site, we have met the tenants a number of times to keep them informed of our timescales and to offer support and advice on finding alternative accommodation.
And I have some more news from Chase Farm. I'm sorry we have so much of it, but there is a lot of it in the paper. Proposals to change access to Chase Farm Hospital have been slammed by people living nearby who claim they will cause gridlock. People express their anger at the multi-million-pound redevelopment by Royal Free NHS Trust to the site in the Ridgeway. Initial plans were presented at a public meeting last Wednesday in which the hospital outlined proposals which could potentially make up the development of the site. However, residents of Ridgecrest showed their anger towards proposed plans to change the entrance to the hospital. Plans state that the hospital intends to move the main hospital access approximately 18 metres to the northwest, where it will form a crossroads with a lightly trafficked Ridgecrest. There will also be a widening of the road and a priority right-hand turn option into the hospital for motorists. Daniel Collier of Ridgecrest lambasted the plans and claimed it would be a nightmare to get out of his road. He said, "Currently we are able to get out the road, but by doing this they will essentially stop us from getting out of our road in the morning, which will be an absolute nightmare. I cannot understand why a roundabout cannot be used to continue the flow of traffic instead of cutting off one road entirely." Residents also fumed about the reduction in parking at the hospital, which under current proposals will see a loss of 300 parking spaces from 1,200 to 900. One person who asked not to be named criticised the plans at the meeting, stating that the lack of parking will create a bun fight for those wanting to park to use the hospital. He said, "You are going to reduce the car parking. We accept that. Some people use our road to get to the hospital, but now the reduction there will be a bum fight to get into a space, which will spoil things for residents who are only allowed one space per property. You, the Royal Free, claim to enforce robust travel plans. We all have cars. How on earth do you think you are going to be able to stop people using their car to go to the hospital?" Speaking at the meeting on behalf of the Royal Free Trust's NHS, Stephen Davies, a transportation consultant from TTP Consulting, said, "I do sympathise that the decision is made for the free flow of the Ridgeway. I accept you may have to wait a little longer to get out, and I suggest using Hadley Road, which is quite quiet at the end of Ridgecrest. Our initial junction was going to be a roundabout, but it did not work as well as the priority junction." Mr. Davies added, "We are only reducing the parking slightly to stop people using it to commute elsewhere. There will be pick-up and drop-off points for people going to the hospital. Consultation on the plans are set to conclude tomorrow." NH bosses in charge of Chase Farm Hospital say they are not considering bringing back an accident and emergency unit. Representatives of the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust, which is redeveloping the hospital site in the Ridgeway, Enfield, were grilled by councillors and members of the public at Highlands School in World's End Lane. Some asked the Trust to reconsider its multi-million redevelopment to include a casualty unit after the hospital's A&E was closed in December 2013, despite years of protests. But Andrew Paniker, Estates Director of the Trust, said, "We are sticking to the Barnet, Enfield and Haringey strategy that we incorporated when we took over Chase Farm and Barnet Hospital's NHS Trust, which does not include the reopening of the A&E. The redevelopment was projected to cost £120 million following initial proposals and will include new hospital buildings, a new primary school and new homes. However, Mr. Paniker stated that the cost has risen way above initial expectations. Concerns were also raised about the size of the development, which we will see all current services moved to a new building of up to 32,000 square metres. Kate Wilkinson, a member of the Save Chase Farm Party and former councillor, said, "This is a woolly proposal. It states that the development will be up to 32,000 square metres. I am sorry, but we are going to need something more legally binding than that. We all know promises have been broken over Chase Farm down the years." Mr. Paniker said the Royal Free would need a minimum of 25,000 square metres. He added, "We understand there has been scheme after scheme shelved regarding Chase Farm, but we will deliver proposals on time and to scale." Residents were also angry about the reduction in parking at the hospital, which under current proposals will see a loss of 300 parking spaces from 1,200 to 900. The redevelopment is set to be completed in 2018 if it is passed by Enfield Borough Council's Planning Committee later this year. Consultation on plans concludes this week.
High Street Bank Barclays is pulling out of North Enfield. The bank has written to its business and domestic customers to tell them that it will close its Lancaster Road branch on March the 20th. The bank said that customers could use other branches in Enfield Town, High Street, Ponders End, and Hertford Road, Enfield Highway. A spokeswoman said that the Lancaster Road branch did not have a heavy use by business customers. Overall, it has seen a 38% decline in custom, and 3/4 of its customers already use nearby branches. The cash point machine will be removed as Barclays leases the building. However, one of the Lancaster Road customers, Martin Sears, said the closure would be inconvenient and force him to fork out a £3 parking fee if he has to travel to the Enfield Town branch. He said the Lancaster Road branch was busy when he visits. He said he was a loyal customer and has banked with a high street giant for more than 30 years. "I don't want to troop to Enfield Town just to draw money out," he said. "They want to get rid of counter staff and automate everything. They say, do online banking. I want to speak to somebody. People want personal banking, not automated banking." A Barclays spokeswoman said, "We hope the range of alternatives, including digital banking, nearby branches and post office access, will help to ease the transition for our customers in North Enfield. And if any customers have any concerns, we would recommend they speak to a member of staff."
It's the end of an era after the death of the borough's oldest resident. Ada Gould, who was just 35 days away from her 110th birthday when she passed away peacefully on Saturday in Elizabeth Lodge Nursing Home in Pennington Drive, Winchmore Hill. "Her passing has left a big hole in my life," her granddaughter Sally Ricketts, 54 of Parsonage Gardens, Enfield, told the Advertiser. "She was an amazing woman, so determined, and she was so active, living on her own in her house in Jennerton Terrace right up until she was in her mid-90s. One of 8 children, Mrs. Gould was born in Islington on Valentine's Day in 1904. before working in service and moving to Winchester Road in Edmonton in her teens. She met and married her husband Albert Edward Gould in April 1926, and the couple lived in Chapel Street, Enfield, and then later in Genetin Terrace, while he worked in Kitchener's fruit and veg shop in Chase Side, and Ada worked on the pharmacy counter in Boots. The couple had 3 children, and Sally told the Advertiser that one of the biggest regrets of her grandmother's life was that she outlived both her sons and her daughter. But her 2 great-grandsons, Sam and Luke, both in their 20s, were a source of immense pride to the 109-year-old. Sam is a great musician and Luke is an actor, and she was just so proud of both of them, said Sally. They brought her so much joy in life. She revealed that her grandmother's death came as a shock to the family, as she had not been sick or ailing. It was very peaceful at the end, said Sally. Her spirit remained strong right up until the end. She really was a fighter. Sally also revealed that Ada loved her cards from the Queen, which she had received for every birthday since she turned 105. That's my Queen, she would always say, looking at those cards, added Sally. She loved them. Funeral arrangements are yet to be announced.
A councillor looking into the number of vacant properties has urged supermarket giant Tesco to go ahead with its plans to open a mini-supermarket in Enfield in the wake of its decision to close its Cheshunt headquarters. Joan Laban, who represents Town Ward, called for clarity about plans to open a Tesco Metro as part of a redevelopment of flats and 2 shop units at the site of a bookmakers and takeaway in Baker Street. The application was approved by Enfield Council last month. Ms. Laban said, "I would be concerned if they pulled out of that site," adding that anything was preferable to an empty shop. She said she was calling for an update into plans for the site. She is chairing a review into vacant shops in Enfield and will be holding a public meeting next month to discuss ways to fill them. The beleaguered supermarket company announced the closure of the Cheshunt site next year, along with its pension scheme and 43 unprofitable stores, as part of a recovery package. It will also put plans to open 49 big stores on hold. Although the company would not confirm how many people work at the administrative HQ in Delamere Road, it is thought that about 3,000 people are employed there. Tesco built its offices in Cheshunt in 1973. It will now move its administration to its other headquarters in Welwyn Garden City. Enfield Council's Cabinet Member for Economic Development, Alan Sitkin, said, "We are working directly with the Department for Work and Pensions, officer responsible for managing the national Tesco situation, to see what can be done. With regards Enfield residents who may be at risk of losing their jobs as a result of Tesco head office in Cheshunt closing, we are absolutely committed to helping all residents who are out of work for some time or have other issues such as depression or dependencies to find work or undergo training to improve their prospects of employment."
We have now reached the end of side 1 of this tape. Please stop your machine now. Take out the cassette, turn it over and start side 2.